4 minutes. That's how long I had to save a man's life with my bare hands, while an entire trauma bay assumed they were watching an ordinary nurse do her ordinary job. Nobody in that room knew I'd spent 7 years learning how to keep someone alive with nothing but my hands and whatever I could improvise, in places considerably less sterile than an ER. By the time his pulse came back, I'd already made a mistake I'd spent 5 years being careful never to make. I'd let someone see exactly what I actually was. The FBI didn't send me flowers. They sent an agent with a folder of everything wrong about the life I'd built, and a question I'd been dreading since the day I decided to disappear. Where did a trauma nurse learn to do that? My name is Maya. This is the night my old life finally caught up with the new one. I've worked nights in the ER at Millbrook Medical Center for 5 years, which is long enough that most of the staff here think they know me. Quiet, reliable, unnervingly calm when things go sideways, which around here happens more nights than not. I've heard the nickname more than once. Ice, some of the residents call me, always affectionately, always a little confused about where it came from. It came from 7 years doing a job that doesn't come with a pension plan or a name you're allowed to put on paper. I don't talk about it. As far as Millbrook's HR department knows, I did contract medical work overseas before nursing school, which is vague enough to be technically true and specific enough that people generally stop asking once you say, overseas contract work, in a certain flat tone of voice. I left that life 5 years ago because I got tired of watching people I trained with disappear into paperwork that said things like, training accident, when the truth was considerably uglier. I told myself the ER would be enough. Real emergencies, real people to save, without anyone deciding afterward that saving them was inconvenient to somebody's operation. Most nights, it is enough. I chart vitals, I run codes, I hold the hands of people who are more frightened than they'll ever admit, and I go home at 7 in the morning and sleep like someone with absolutely nothing to hide. The night this happened started like any other Tuesday. Rain against the ambulance bay doors, a waiting room half full of the usual, a broken wrist, a fever that wouldn't break, a man who'd argued with a bar stool and lost. Ordinary. Forgettable. Exactly the kind of night I'd built an entire second life around having as many of as possible. Then the radio at the charge desk cracked to life at 1:47 in the morning, and none of that was true anymore. There's a specific memory that surfaces every time this job asks more of me than a normal night should. A rain-soaked dockyard 5 years ago, a wounded teammate bleeding out faster than field dressings could keep pace with, gunfire still cracking somewhere behind us in the dark. My team lead, a woman everyone called Frost, put a hand flat on my chest once things went sideways and said the only thing that ever actually mattered in moments like that. Panic is contagious, so is calm. Pick which one you're spreading. I'd spent 2 years learning to spread the second one before I ever fully understood what she meant. By the time I understood it completely, it was because I'd had to be the calm one in a room where almost everyone else had a very good reason not to be, more times than I've ever bothered counting. Frost didn't make it out of that dockyard. I did, because 5 years of training taught my body to keep functioning long after the rest of me wanted to stop, and because somebody, to this day I still don't know who, sold our position to people who were waiting for us before we'd even arrived. I left that life 8 months after the dockyard, once the internal investigation quietly closed without ever naming who'd leaked us. I became a nurse because it let me keep doing the one part of that job I never wanted to give up, being the calm one in the worst moment of somebody else's life, without any of the parts that got Frost killed for reasons nobody in power ever bothered to explain to the people who loved her. I thought I'd left all of it behind cleanly. I was wrong about that in a way I wouldn't fully understand until 1:47 in the morning, 5 years later, when a radio call came in that sounded exactly like every other Tuesday night. Millbrook, this is Unit 12, inbound with a single MVA victim, male, mid-40s, unrestrained driver, possible internal bleeding, ETA 4 minutes. Routine. We get a car accident call most nights. I had Trauma Bay 2 prepped before the ambulance doors even opened, and I want to be honest about the fact that nothing about the dispatch call told me this was going to be different from any other Tuesday night collision. What told me was the man himself, the second the paramedics wheeled him in. His injuries didn't match his story. A car accident produces a specific, recognizable pattern: bruising along the seatbelt line, blunt trauma consistent with impact against a wheel or dashboard, glass lacerations if the windshield went. This man had a laceration low on his abdomen that was too clean, too precise, exactly the width and depth of a blade rather than broken glass. Mostly hidden beneath bruising, somebody had clearly taken the time to make look consistent with a crash. Somebody had staged this. Somebody had put a knife in this man and then made sure his car ended up wrapped around a guardrail to explain the blood. I didn't say any of that out loud. Dr. Osei, the attending that night, was already calling for the massive transfusion protocol, already elbow deep in a belly that was filling with blood faster than 2 units could replace it. "I can't find the bleeder," he said, voice climbing toward the specific pitch that means a surgeon is starting to lose the thread. "It's too deep. There's too much blood. I can't see." The patient's eyes opened, just barely, just long enough to find mine across the trauma bay, and he said 4 words in a voice that had nothing left behind it. "Tell Draper. Praxis." Then he was gone again, monitors screaming, and I had maybe 90 seconds to decide whether I was going to keep being the nurse everyone in that room thought they knew. I stopped being that nurse somewhere in the next 10 seconds. I didn't decide to. My hands just already knew what to do before the rest of me had finished catching up. "Move," I said to Dr. Osei, and something in my voice made him actually do it, which surprised both of us in the moment and only one of us afterward. I didn't reach for the clamps he'd been fumbling with. I went in with my fingers, past the fascia, past the hematoma he'd been digging around blind, because there wasn't time to find the bleeder anyway except by feel. I found the tear in the artery in about 2 seconds, pinned it against the pelvic bone with 2 fingers the way you'd pin a struggling animal still, and reached for a length of catheter tubing from the crash cart with my other hand. "What are you doing?" Osei said, somewhere between a question and a plea. "Buying him 10 minutes, I said, and built, in under 90 seconds, the kind of improvised internal seal that field medics in my old life called the anchor line, because it was designed for exactly this: a bleed too deep and too fast for standard tools, in a place where the only surgeon available was you, alone, with whatever you'd managed to carry in. It is not something taught in nursing school. It is not something any civilian trauma course would recognize. I knew that the second I did it, the same way I knew it the first dozen times I'd done it, years ago, in places that made a Tuesday night ER look almost peaceful by comparison. His pressure came back. Thin, then steadier, the monitor's screaming tone finally breaking into something that sounded almost like a normal, frightened heartbeat instead of a countdown. Dr. Osei stared at me across the table, his gloved hands still hovering over blood that had stopped moving the wrong direction. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Neither did I. I peeled off my gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and told the charge nurse to get him up to the OR the second he was stable enough to move. Then I walked out of that trauma bay toward the break room, already knowing, with the specific dread of somebody who spent 5 years avoiding exactly this moment, that a night like this one doesn't stay contained to a single trauma bay. It travels. It gets noticed by exactly the kind of people I'd spent 5 years making sure never had a reason to look for me. The hospital's small conference room usually gets used for insurance disputes and end-of-life family meetings. That night, it got used for something else entirely. Agent Draper introduced herself with a badge and a folder thick enough that I knew, before she'd said a single word past her name, that this wasn't going to be a conversation about hospital protocol. "Maya Reyes," she said, sitting across from me, not bothering with the kind of small talk people usually use to soften a room like this. "Trauma nurse, 5 years at Millbrook, nursing degree from a program in Ohio you never actually attended." I kept my expression exactly as flat as I'd trained it to be for exactly this kind of moment. "I think you have the wrong file." "I have the right file," Draper said. "I have security footage from your trauma bay tonight showing a technique your attending physician has since described verbatim as something out of a classified manual, not a nursing textbook." I have a nursing license issued off credentials that trace back to a program administrator who died 4 years ago and never taught a single class you're on record for attending. And I have this." She slid a photograph across the table. Grainy, long lens, time-stamped 6 years ago. A woman in unmarked tactical gear kneeling over a wounded operative in what looked like a rain-soaked dockyard somewhere, hands buried in his chest, doing precisely the kind of work I'd just done in a trauma bay 20 minutes earlier. The face in the photo was unmistakably mine. "That woman is listed in a classified file under the call sign Sable," Draper said quietly. "Sable was killed in an operation that went bad 5 years ago. Confirmed dead. Case closed." She leaned forward. "So either I'm looking at a very committed impersonator, or I'm looking at a dead woman who just saved my witness's life in front of 6 people." I looked at the photograph for a long moment, feeling 5 years of careful, quiet distance collapse all at once. "He's your witness," I said, instead of answering the question she'd actually asked. Draper's expression didn't change. "Answer the question first." "I wasn't killed," I said. "I made sure the record said I was, because the people who leaked our extraction coordinates were never going to stop looking for me if they thought there was still someone left to talk." "Who leaked them?" "I don't know," I said, and meant it, in the specific way that had kept me up more nights over the last 5 years than the operation itself ever had. "Someone with access to our OPSEC sold my team out. 2 of the 6 of us walked away. I've spent 5 years assuming I'd never get close enough to find out who." Draper studied me for a long moment, the kind of look that measures a person down to the studs. "What if I told you," she said slowly, "that the man on your table tonight might be exactly the person who could answer that question, if he survives long enough to talk?" Something cold settled low in my chest. "Who is he?" "His name is Whitmore," Draper said. "Former intelligence analyst. 2 years ago, he found evidence that a private firm called Praxis Group has been running an illegal surveillance operation on federal judges, collecting material to quietly blackmail rulings in their clients' favor. He's been feeding us documentation for 8 months. Tonight, on his way to a scheduled handoff, somebody put a knife in him and wrapped his car around a guardrail to make it look like exactly the kind of accident nobody investigates twice. He said 2 words to me before he went under. I said, "Tell Draper, Praxis." Draper's jaw tightened. Then he knew exactly who might be listening in that trauma bay, which means Praxis might know it too, eventually, once they finish wondering why their hit didn't take. She closed the folder. "I need to know if whoever did this is finished, or if they're planning on finishing the job in a hospital bed instead of a guardrail. And I need someone who can tell the difference between hospital staff and somebody who isn't, in a building I don't have jurisdiction to lock down without probable cause." I thought about the 2 men who'd apparently disguised an assassination as an accident well enough to almost work. "They'll try again," I said, "once they realize he's still breathing." "That's the assumption," Draper agreed. "Which is the other reason I'm here." "I retired from that life for a reason," I said. "I know," Draper said. "I read the reason. Your team lead didn't make it out of that dockyard. You did, because you swam 2 miles in open water rather than trust an extraction boat that never showed." She folded her hands on the table. "I'm not asking you to become Sable again, permanently. I'm asking for one night. Whitmore's in the ICU on this floor right now, and if Praxis sends someone to finish the job, it's not going to be a man in tactical gear kicking down a door. It's going to be somebody in scrubs or a maintenance uniform walking through your hallways like they belong there, because that's exactly how professionals like this operate. You're the only person in this building who'd actually notice." She wasn't wrong, and we both knew it. "If I do this," I said, "it never becomes a file. No call sign, nothing that puts Sable back in a system anywhere." "Done," Draper said, fast enough that I understood exactly how much she needed this to work. "And I go back to being a nurse when it's over. Permanently." "Done." I stood up, already running through the mental checklist I hadn't used in 5 years. Exits, blind spots, who had badge access to the ICU floor after midnight, which faces I recognized and which ones I only assumed I did because a uniform is a very effective disguise for people who understand that most of us stop looking past one. Then, I need the visitor log for this floor going back 6 hours, I said, and I need eyes on every single person wearing a badge who isn't supposed to still be here at 2 in the morning. I found him at 2:40 in the morning, 40 minutes into a walkthrough that should have taken 10, because I was checking every single detail instead of trusting a single badge at face value. A man in hospital maintenance coveralls, standing outside Whitmore's ICU room with a work order clipboard, telling the floor nurse he was there to check a reported issue with the room's medical gas line. Routine. Boring. Exactly the kind of interruption nobody questions at 3 in the morning in a hospital that runs on trust between departments who rarely double-check each other's paperwork. Except Millbrook's maintenance department doesn't run overnight shifts on weekdays, a fact I happen to know because I've spent 5 years learning every routine in this building, the same way I once learned the routine of men I was watching from much further away. And his boots were wrong. Wrong tread pattern for a man who spends his days on hospital tile, wrong wear pattern for someone who's actually on his feet all shift. They were boots built for movement over uneven ground, the kind you buy when tile floors aren't actually where you spend your working life. I didn't confront him in the hallway. That would have told him I'd noticed, and a man who's noticed too early simply changes his approach instead of abandoning it. I radioed Draper from the supply closet instead, keeping my voice below the hum of the building's own ventilation. Maintenance uniform, ICU corridor, fake work order. He's not here to check a gas line. Copy. My team's 4 minutes out, Draper said. Can you keep eyes without engaging? I could have. That would have been the careful, retired answer. Then I watched him check his watch, glance both directions down an empty corridor, and reach into a toolbox for something that had absolutely no business inside a maintenance kit, a syringe, capped, tucked against the side wall of the case like it had been added for exactly one specific purpose. 4 minutes was 3 minutes too long. I stepped out of the supply closet into the corridor with an empty vitals card in front of me, the most unremarkable prop a nurse can push through a hospital hallway at 3 in the morning, and closed the distance before he'd finished deciding I was worth a second look. He turned fast when he registered me actually approaching, syringe already half out of the case, and everything after that happened in considerably less time than it takes to describe it. I got a hand on his wrist before the needle cleared the toolbox, turned it the same precise quarter-inch past comfortable I'd used 100 times in a different life, and put the syringe on the floor instead of into anyone's IV line. He was strong and trained, and clearly furious at how fast the last 4 seconds had gone from a routine job to a disaster. He came at me with his free hand, and I redirected it the way you redirect momentum instead of fighting it head-on, using the vitals card as a wall between us for the half second I needed to get his other arm locked behind him. The floor nurse who'd let him in screamed. 2 security guards came around the corner at a dead run, 30 seconds too late to matter, and exactly on time to help me hold him against the wall until Draper's team burst through the stairwell door. Draper picked up the syringe with a gloved hand, studied the label, and her expression went very still. "Potassium chloride," she said quietly, "enough to stop a heart and read like cardiac arrest on every chart in the building." "He wasn't here to check a gas line," I said, breathing only slightly harder than I had been 10 minutes earlier. "No," Draper agreed, looking at me with an expression that had shifted, somewhere in the last 4 seconds, from cautious ally to something closer to genuine respect. "He was here because Praxis already knows Whitmore's alive, which means we're out of time to be careful about how fast we move on the rest of them." The man in the maintenance uniform gave up 2 names within 6 hours of arriving at a federal holding facility, apparently deciding fairly quickly that loyalty to Praxis Group wasn't worth what a murder charge in a hospital corridor was going to cost him. Combined with 8 months of documentation Whitmore had already handed over, it was, according to Draper, enough to end Praxis Group's operating license and put 3 of its executives in front of a grand jury within the month. Whitmore came out of surgery that morning with a full recovery expected, and a level of federal protection I suspect he'd been hoping for since the day he first decided his conscience was worth more than his paycheck. Draper found me in the break room around 6, 2 coffees in hand, and set one down in front of me without asking if I wanted it. "Your file," she said. "The one with your real name in it. The one that says Sable died 5 years ago in a dockyard that got you here instead." She held up a small, unmarked drive. "There's exactly one copy of the update that would say otherwise." She set it on the table and, without another word, poured her coffee over it until the plastic case sat in a shallow, ruined puddle that no lab in the country was getting anything useful out of. "Efficient," I said. "I've read your file," Draper said. "I had a feeling you'd appreciate efficient more than ceremony." She wasn't wrong about that either. I went back to my regular rotation 3 nights later, once the FBI had finished the last of their questions and Millbrook's administration had finished pretending they fully understood what had happened on the ICU floor that night. Dr. Osei still looks at me sometimes like he's trying to reconcile 2 different people standing in the same set of scrubs. I've stopped trying to explain it to him, mostly because I'm not sure there's a version of the explanation that doesn't sound impossible even to me, 5 years and 1 very long night later. Sometimes, on quiet shifts, I still catch myself watching the ambulance bay doors a half second before dispatch calls it in, or noticing the wrong pair of boots on the wrong person before anyone else in the room has looked twice. 7 years of training like that doesn't fully retire just because you decide it should. Most nights, though, it doesn't have anywhere in particular to go. Most nights, the biggest emergency at Millbrook is still just a broken wrist or a fever that won't break. And I like it that way. Exactly as much as I did before any of this happened. I never did stop being what I already was. I just became something Millbrook never quite realized it had. A nurse who remembers exactly how much can be riding on an ordinary Tuesday night. If you've ever underestimated somebody who seemed too calm for the situation they were in, tell me about it in the comments. I read every one. And if this story kept you here until the end, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps keep these stories coming. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.